Welcome, everybody, to the Now Moment Journey podcast. And I'm super excited to have a guest today, Leila Ghazal, Galactic Shaman. And
Yes,
I would love to have her just get us started with just some of her early earth and water experiences, and we'll kind of just go from there.
sounds good. Thank you so much for the warm welcome. I'm so excited to be here, and thank you all for listening. So as Kirsten introduced me, my name is Leila Ghazal. I guess do I just go by several different titles, but definitely one of them is being a galactic shaman. And a lot of people have questions about that. It's very similar to being an earth shaman. Um, However, I do glean a lot of my insights or a lot of my wisdom from the stars or different galaxies or dimensions. So that's sort of the distinction, just so people are aware off the bat. And I started out that way with I've had, several years of awakening, right? Because we never really stop awakening. But I started with a lot of the galactic knowledge that came in first. So a lot of my um, sort of skills that came in were, galaxy, star, planet related, right? So a lot of the astrology came in first. But then as of last year, I believe it was August of 2022, I had this major download where I knew I was supposed to work with the earth somehow, right? So the ley lines were calling out to me. There was a lot of connection to the light grid on the earth, which is basically just a network of light portals and different energy centers that are super prominent on earth. And you may know of several of them. I mean, obviously the pyramids of Giza and Teotihuacan. So all areas where pyramids are erected. And where else? I mean, Peru's one great spot. Anyways, not to go into all the different mapping of the grids, but I knew that I was supposed to be working with the earth in a prominent way somehow, and I didn't know how. And so I was really drawn to these underwater pyramids in the Azores, and I was drawn to actually go there. I was really called to work with the earth in that specific location. So my partner and I ended up going there last summer, and I don't know if you've watched Moana. For anybody who's seen Moana, the Disney movie, she's basically this little girl in Tafiti on this island where she ends up connecting to the water in this really beautiful, magical way, where she has this really playful connection and relationship to the water, who ends up becoming almost like a guardian to her. And so when I was in the Azores, I remember once we were really remote, once we separated from all the different types of people, the earth began waking up and playing with me, which I thought was so sweet. So just like, the water was playing with Moana, the earth was having that playful relationship with me, almost yearning for that connection, with somebody who knew, somebody who understood, somebody who could see the earth in the way that I could. And I actually spoke to Marissa, Kirsten, your sister, and we were talking about it, and she said it was really interesting because obviously in the Americas we have the indigenous people, we have the Native Americans who have really cultivated that relationship with the land, whereas in places like the Azores, there never has been an indigenous population that really cared for and nurtured that relationship with the earth. And so it really was thirsting and yearning for that sort of relationship. And so I was called and actually had a connection to the spirits there who really welcomed me really beautifully. I have a little story about that, but I'm just going to leave it there for now, just because I've already said so much. I hope that kind of clarifies how this relationship, this beautiful, beautiful connection started.
I love what you just said. I thank you. No, you didn't say too much at all. In fact, wonderful, wonderful jumping off points and really important stuff that you're talking about. Especially, I wanted to zone in on the the fact that you're talking about the in particular in the Azores, that you were feeling like the earth and the water, well, we'll just use the water in this case, really wanted a relationship with you, was really yearning for a
Mhm.
relationship with you. And that is, it seems like something that should be a no-brainer. I guess maybe it seems like that, but it really isn't. That concept of whatever it is, the earth, the water, nature spirits, just various the what they some the academics call it the liminal space, or the in between
Mm.
spaces, however you want to use those words. But I think that when you go to for me, when I think back to what's
Mhm.
kind of sustained me all these years, and really I'm relatively new to this myself. It's not like I've been doing this for like 50 years or something, but I think the first thing that I got super excited about was this idea that the earth had this kind of personality, like depending on where
Mm.
you are. Like, let's for me it was with water. Like, I think water, since we're talking about water here and you mentioned water, I'd say water was one of my first places, or beings, I guess, that I, probably because I come from kind of a water family, so to speak. And I think
Mm.
sometimes that can tie into it a little bit, whether it's known or unknown, in terms of what you do or do not know about your family. It was always kind of there in the background, this kind of, uh, kind of
Mm.
things centered around water, and so to have, and learning years later, I mean, a lot of this stuff just happened where you just have these experiences. You go to a body of water, for example, and I don't know about you. This is something I was going to ask you actually in just a
Mhm.
second, but I don't want to get too into like the nitty gritty part. But it's interesting to find out, I think, from various people how they receive information. For example,
Mm.
like I tend to get a combination of clairaudience and maybe clairsentience, so hearing and maybe feeling a little bit. There's a little
Mhm.
bit of seeing maybe, but I tend to think that the um, probability, or the I want to make it sound a little more magical than that, but um, the high volume or the high intensity in a positive way, like the really magical experiences, they do tend to happen not exclusively around water, but they tend to be fairly prevalent around bodies of water. And
Mhm.
it's interesting to find out how people receive that information. Oh, and what they get, and sometimes they get it right there at the source, and sometimes they get it like maybe the next day or maybe the next year, or it's so varied. So I guess
Absolutely.
what I would want to kind of come back at you with is maybe either in the Azores or any other places. Feel free to open up locations wherever you want. Um, how did you receive that information, or what did it kind of feel like for you?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for elaborating on all of that. I'm happy to know that we have that in common, right? Because I don't know how common it is actually to receive this sort of information from the earth and the oceans and bodies of water. And now that you mentioned that, it's become more apparent to me that water also has had a really big hand in communicating with me, even though it may not have been obvious to me at the time when I was in the Azores, because the connection I had strongly was also with the vegetation, like the flowers would speak to me, the earth itself would communicate and hold me and say, just have like a chat with me, which was really beautiful. And this has happened to me, since then. I would have connections to the different parts of the earth, just kind of as a whole. But then when I zoom in a little bit, I do realize that bodies of water have always been involved in this story, right? When I was in the Azores, it was these beautiful, just magnificent waterfalls that were so prevalent there. I mean, it was really just like a force field that came down, and I just had this image of the Great Mother, right? The Great Mother that gives and gives and gives and sustains us all. And that was really something that I hold with me and you know, sort of hold in reverence since then. And I guess the way I really experienced a lot of these things is through several different channels. So fortunately, I've had several channels open up since my awakenings. And the one that I would believe would is the strongest is the clairsentience, I believe. So feeling. I'm very much a feeler. My emotions are really the way I navigate the world. And I usually know something 6 months before it actually happens, and usually I can feel it in my body. So that's definitely my strongest power. And then the second strongest is claircognizance. So just knowing, right, that inner knowing and just trusting that my intuition is following me, or I'm sorry, leading me, and I'm following it to the right places. So those two have been the strongest. But I also have experienced, you know, clairvoyance where I've seen things happen beforehand. Usually this is in the dream state. I also have had clairaudience where I've had voices come through. So, you know, it's been really a mix, but for the most part, I just feel like I know certain things without knowing how I know them. And I also feel things very intensely. And so I could, you know, it's almost like being a super empath, right? So not only experiencing the emotions of the earth, but also experiencing, you know, how the earth feels in a very palpable and physical way. So I'll give you a small example. I was in San Diego not very long ago, I believe it was in April, around eclipse time, which always makes things just heightened in terms of feelings and things like that. And a lot of my experiences have actually been very pronounced around, you know, important lunar or, you know, solar activities, or, you know, even the water became so much more prominent in my life ever since Saturn entered into Pisces, right, which is a water sign. That's been I mean, I can talk for an hour over that. But when I was in San Diego around April of this past year, I remember, you know, walking to this conference and I was super excited, and I was walking in front of a field, right? Like a huge field of grass. And I remember the earth distinctly stopping me and saying, take your shoes off and walk on the grass. And before this, I didn't actually know that earthing was something that is obviously really important for our, you know, to clear our fields, but also it needed to be done when the grass is like fresh, you know, just, you know, recently rained on, or early in the morning when there's dew on it, because of the electromagnetic property of being able to conduct electricity. So I actually didn't know this before that. So I ended up taking my shoes off, walking, you know, obliging, of course. And as I was walking, it felt really nice, but at the same time, I started getting poked by these thorns. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, what is this? And then the earth just kept saying, like, keep walking, keep walking, keep walking. And then at some point, I just couldn't bear the pain. And so I stopped and I put my shoes back on, and I was like, what the heck? And as soon as I said that, there was this patch of soft sand that I ended up stepping on, almost like a, you know, like solace after being, you know, stung by all these thorns. And I was like, what was that about? And the earth said, this is not punishment. This is just to show you exactly how I feel. And I was like, whoa, my mind was blown. It was just it was the culmination of her trying to, you know, teach humans that, like, you're harming me and I feel it. And I want you to know how I feel. So that was super powerful.
That's really intense. You know, I feel kind of, I feel bad that you had to go through that, because what's
Thank
the
you.
time of it is because, you know, before that time period, because I think some of this has to do with actual, you know, linear time, where in the
Hmm.
last couple of years, I've noticed the accelerated unhappiness of the earth field, so to speak. Whereas
Yes.
it was not as, it was there back maybe 15 years ago or 10 years ago, but there was still kind of like a wiggle room, if you will.
Hmm.
And there were, it seems a lot more
Like pronounced.
pronounced and urgent, and yeah, and so,
Yes,
you
urgent.
know, especially in the, I'd say you said 20, well, I'm not sure when your San Diego thing was, but I guess that was recently, but, or fairly recently, but even in the last
Yeah.
couple of years, probably even the last 5 years, probably. So,
Wow.
I'd say we're at 2023. I'd say, let's say 3 years for sure. Yeah. Um, because there was a period of time where, um, I could go not far from where we live right now in the States, in Florida.
Mhm.
And granted, I haven't been to a lot of these places recently, but it just felt more, it never, when you live in suburbia, it never feels completely wild, okay? But there are moments when you can kind of create or find slight pockets of wildness in terms of, which is what I feel like I'm always searching for, the kind of like pure, um,
Yeah.
raw,
Like
raw,
wilderness. Hmm.
raw
Hmm.
wilderness. If you can't get to it, like can't go to the jungle, because most of us can't go to the jungle at a moment's notice.
Right.
You have to kind of find those pockets in the areas you live in, and Florida being a place where you can kind of do that. It was a lot easier to do that even 3, 4 years ago, and for some reason, it's the one message I feel when I listen to your story about walking in the field and having that conversation with her
Hmm.
is, it's almost like the urgency has gotten more pronounced, like we're saying.
Yes.
And I feel bad that you couldn't experience. I mean, I'm sure you had other experiences before that, but it just seems like the timing of it is just it's kind of a bummer. It's like, great,
Yeah.
thanks for. But I mean, I think the thing that I flip flop back and forth between, which is trying to make sure people tune into whatever they can in their environment. And I tend to talk about this more in the Patreon, but I do occasionally talk about it on the podcast. I may talk about it a little bit more, which is, even if
Mhm.
you're in a suburban area and you can only take a 20-minute walk every day or every other day or whenever, as frequently as possible, there's got to be a place where you can go just for a few moments, even if it's a patch of grass or something, and just try to tune into that space. And there's a variety of ways you can do that without actually having to, you don't have to actually sit down and meditate. You can, but you don't have
Yeah.
to. And it was super easy to do that before the pandemic, actually. And I
Mm.
feel like the pandemic, I mean, I could do that. I could walk up my street with cars going by me at 40 miles an hour or higher, faster than that.
Mhm.
And I could still tune
Mhm.
in. And for some reason, in the last 3 years, ever since the pandemic, it's been a big challenge to do that. And I thought, well,
Mm.
is that my brain system? Well, yeah, maybe it is. Maybe it's, it's some of me too. But on the other hand, I'm actually doing more spiritual work than I was 3 years ago. So
Yeah.
it shouldn't be like that. So um, I think I think what you and I are talking about is, we're gifted with this ability, but I feel like this is something that in its own way could be honed in on by anybody. And some of it is, it can be as complex as you want it to be, but the first step is to zero in on, let's say if you're at a body of water, you're walking on the beach, if you're lucky enough to go to the beach, or maybe you're near a river or
Mhm.
something like that. Even if you just have a few minutes there, to kind of zero in on the wind, and if there's birds
Yes.
around, or if you feel the salt, the salt air. And sometimes the wind will give you kind of, um, some kind of message or impulse that makes you
Oh,
think of something.
absolutely.
And so, just
Absolutely.
if that is making you think of anything, I would love to also like pick your brain about some of the other places you've been to, or anything else that you wanted to talk about.
Sure, sure. Well, I have I just have a few things I wanted to address, from what you mentioned. First of all, I wanted to just acknowledge the fact that you've been, in this for such a long time, and that your perspective uh, is so important. You know what I mean? It's so valuable because you really can see the difference between how were, 15 years ago versus now. For many of us who have woken up only recently within the last few years, we don't really have that perspective. And so I feel like you're really holding that for people like me, which I mean, I really, really am grateful for the fact that you can hold that spiritual space for us and almost like, introduce us and welcome us into this, beautiful like spiritual realm that is obviously very beautiful, but also can be very difficult and challenging to navigate. So, I wanted to thank you for that, for like being a guardian. And
Oh, thank you.
yeah, of course. And I know we talked a lot about water, and for some reason, like every time we talk about water, I get a flash of Andromeda whenever I talk to you. It's the funniest thing. I'm just like, I don't know if you've explored that or not, but it always seems to jump out of me in terms of maybe your connection to water. I don't
Well,
necessarily. Mhm.
let me
Yeah, go
interrupt
ahead.
you real quick. Keep
Yeah,
going
yeah,
after
yeah.
this. And Andromeda, is that related to the Milky Way at all, or no? Or am I thinking of
It's
something else?
um it's close, right? So we're in the Milky Way, and Andromeda is the closest galaxy to the Milky Way. And at some point, it is said that the two will merge. But this is not, for a couple million years or so. But they are actually on their way to merging. And it's funny because I had this download in college, even before I had this spiritual awakening, and I saw the two almost merging, and I was just like, that's really interesting. So
Wow.
it's funny how, you don't realize certain things are within your consciousness until way later on. But yeah, just that's like a little, galactic aside. um, but also, I just wanted to address a lot of what you mentioned. Now I can't think of it, obviously, because Mercury retrograde is still in full force.
I do that to
Um,
people sometimes. I get so excited about something that we do forget about it.
yeah.
I think the thing I was really wanting to zero in on and jump in when you're ready is
Mhm.
these people call them power spots, or and there's
Mhm.
varying levels of them. Obviously, a place like the pyramids of Giza that you mentioned, and the great sacred places in the Mesoamerica and
Mhm.
Peru, and the various places that have been obviously desecrated in the United States, and
Yeah.
to be fair, across the entire globe. What we're looking for, it just didn't even occur to me until, like, to be honest, the other day. I was like,
Mhm.
I never even realized this, but I always think that what I'm looking for is the awesome magical energy in nature. I'm like, that's what I'm looking for all the time.
Mm.
And
Yes. Okay.
so, you're looking for that, like what you said, where you were at the water in the Azores, and or the wind, is blowing across your face, and you felt, kind of caressed by
Yeah.
Mother Earth. We're looking for that, and
Yes.
we just, yeah. So let me let you take the reins there. Yeah.
Thank you so much. No, this really, really reminded me of what I was going to say. Thank you. Thank you for mentioning that. It's funny because, like I said, a lot of these different elements seem to happen around very specific astrological timing. And one of those things was actually recently on the full, super, super blue moon in Pisces, where, I had been searching for a power spot in this area, and I'm in New Jersey, in the most sort of like densely populated area. It's very city like, very much like New York City, and it's really hard to actually find a spot where there's any sort of wilderness. And so, for me, I was kind of going through years and years just trying to escape, trying to find a place where I can be within nature. I have daydreams of swimming in the ocean in the Caribbean, and it's challenging because we want to be here now, and we know that there's a mission and there's a reason why I'm here in this specific place at the specific time. And, I obviously honor my mission of working through this very dense area, right? Kind of trying to transmute all of the heavy energies of the area. However, I mean, it's so intense. It's one of the most dense places. And I really have that yearning to connect to nature in a more, deep and meaningful way. So, we were, my partner and I were walking along, I don't even know, it was like a street close by after getting groceries, and he mentioned that there's a river close by, and I was like, a river? And I just lit up. And it was the first time we actually stood there watching the water glisten and having that, smooth, just summer breeze hit our faces. And I had this epiphany where I was just like, wow, this entire time I had no idea that there was a river so close by. I mean, I almost had to hold my past self in a hug and, say, I'm so sorry. Like, I didn't provide this for you when you really needed it. So, just to have something like that is so grounding, and it just makes such a big difference in someone's mental health. I think back to all the times I was really struggling, and I'm like, how much could I have benefited if I had just spent 5 minutes by this river? So that's something that I wanted to mention in connection to what you were saying. And, even though it's been really difficult connecting to, the spiritual realm and the magical, elements of spirituality here over the past few years, I mean, I'm with you, right? Like the energy has been chaotic. There's been a lot of death pollution, lots of just, I feel like portals have been open, lots of transmuting of energy, lots of clearing of, past life wounds. Even I feel like it's all been sort of coming to the surface, and it has really been very difficult connecting. But I really take solace in the fact that, I've had these small moments where the earth has really connected with me in a way where, she's shown me where, like, I want you to feel like I'm suffering, but I also want you to know that I love you and I'm here for you. And I feel like those are the moments that I really hold dear to my heart. I mean, one of those moments has been, this past May, again, freaking like eclipse season, like it just always intensifies everything. I was by the ocean in Florida, and I had just spent months and months and months in the Northeast with no connection to water, and I had ran towards the water, clothes and all, and I just felt, Gaia, or through the ocean, open up her arms and just welcome me. And I burst into tears saying, oh my God, mother. And it really felt like this coming home to mother, which is absolutely incredible. I mean, the only other time I felt this was in the Caribbean, in Antigua, where I was just crying like a child in the ocean and feeling like I was home, because I think it reminded me of the oceans of Sirius. But it was extremely emotional for, many reasons. But just feeling held, feeling held in the mother's womb, I think was the biggest takeaway from those experiences. And I've had them in different locations on Earth, but they're few and far between, so they're very potent and easy to remember.
That's amazing. I love what you just said about running into the water, just as if you're just running home, running home
Yeah,
to loving mother. And
yeah.
the Antigua, I think that's is that Barbados?
It's St. John's of
St.
Antigua.
John.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the Caribbean Sea, or is it a different
Hmm.
body of water? Yeah, Caribbean
Yeah,
Sea.
it's the Caribbean. It's actually, one of the calmest oceans I've ever been into. So, the more south you go in the Caribbean, the more clear the waters get. And obviously it's hotter, but it's also just more serene, and it really gives me Atlantis vibes. And I think that really cleared a lot of
Right.
the wounds that I've had from Atlantis. So that was really beautiful.
That's amazing. So you even felt a past life, or uh, well, that's a past life memory. Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
You know, when you were
absolutely.
talking, I was thinking about when you were talking about mental health benefits, and
Mhm.
I always say I don't like talking about, my grief, but I'll bring it up because I
Mm,
think it's important for people to know that some of the work that, even though I don't spend a lot of time talking about, ways to uh, improve your emotional health, because that's not really a focus of mine. But I think what I think
yeah.
that I need to bring it up because and say that your emotional health, a person, I should say, a person's emotional health and a person's mental health, in
Mhm,
addition to other areas of their health, physical, spiritual, etc. I feel like working with the earth in this way that you and I are talking about is
mhm.
actually 100% awesomely beneficial for your mental, emotional. We already know this. We have the scientific backup about, forest bathing, and there's
Yeah,
articles upon articles that you can read about even just meditation and spending time in nature and da 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 da. And that's very. I'm not discounting that. I think it's very good to have a valid scientific, um, backup for everything. But
sure.
I think
Sure.
a lot of people who are into what we call, I hate this expression, woo woo. Uh,
Yeah,
Back in the old days, pre-Roman and pre, uh, uh, even more ancient than that, it wouldn't have been
mhm,
called woo woo. It would have just been existing. Our ancestors would have
right,
been existing with the earth, and because they
right.
needed to do that to survive, but also they needed to be in communion with the earth because they had to survive. And one of the side benefits was that they felt that familial, motherly, and some places have kind of like a more fatherly kind of approach to it. So both
Mhm.
sides being, depending on where you are, and like they just kind of, why they knew how to do things like tracking and figuring out where to find sources of water or sources of, vegetation, etc. Whether they were hunters or they were, I'm talking about a long time ago. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
So
yeah.
I was thinking when you were talking about some of the experiences you were having, and that it cleared some of the past life stuff, especially,
Mhm,
it made me think of the epigenetics that, I feel has
mhm.
come up, like in a good way. I mean, there's so much stuff that for so long that when I heard the word ancestor, I was just like, okay, I don't want to think about the ghosts anymore. But I think what's been really great for me, and I'm hoping to, this is why I was so excited to talk to you about this, is that
Mhm,
I think there's a significant amount of people who have
mhm,
gifts in the area of either, connecting with these kind of what we would call invisible energies of the earth, because they aren't clearly visible to the eye,
mhm.
but you feel them and you experience them in whatever way you do, whether it's water, air, fire,
Mhm.
ether, etc. And I think there's a significant amount of people right now living on the earth who either are tapping into it or are just beginning to kind of be aware that this is like, first off, it's a great feeling. Number
Yeah,
two, it helps your mental health. It helps you not feel depressed all the time, especially,
right.
I hate to bring in politics and society and all that stuff, but let's face it, we live in a death culture right now.
It's
And
important, yeah.
if people don't think we live in a death culture, then they really need to look at like what's going on. So, um, when you're around energy, like you can, if you can be, like you said, you discovered even in New Jersey, there's a river,
Mhm.
and you just felt so over. I was literally smiling when you said that, because I thought that's it. That's the excitement
Yes.
and the connection. It's nice to know, because the one thing, while Peru is fabulous and I refer to it all the time, but I don't live there. I don't live there
Yeah,
24/7. And
right.
most people, they go to these places. They go to Chichen Itza, they go to Machu Picchu, they go to Egypt, but you got to come home.
Right,
And what do
exactly.
you do? What do you do when you get home? Well, most people just go back to what they were doing before they left to go on their trip, because it's just a trip for them. But there's some of us
Exactly.
who get changed permanently for the better and have to find a way when we get back into quote unquote civilization, and I'm doing the air quotes right now.
Yeah.
It I like civilization a lot. There's plenty of things I love about it. Believe me, I'm not dissing civilization. I'm just saying, can't we all get along? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
We
of
can have
course.
when I mean not just people, but like we can have we can have the magic of the earth in our civilization, and that's sort of why I'm so excited that you've been talking about your experiences, and I'm glad you mentioned the mental health benefits. Um, what I would like to ask you about
Hmm.
is, because I really don't know anything about it, but you were talking a little bit about the eclipse season, and also you mentioned the super blue moon in Pisces.
Hmm.
What does that mean for you? Like, just for those of us who are kind of like, don't know much about astrology. I know a little, but not much. So,
Yeah, sure. No, I'm happy to explain. And I feel like with what you said, you just opened up an entire Pandora's box of like maybe a 3 hour monologue that I do about all these things about civilization, about how we used to live in commune with the earth a long time. Oh my gosh, I can get into all of that, but let me just answer your question first. Um, So, in terms of the astrology, I find that because, this kind of goes hand in hand in what you were talking about. I find that, we only started living in this, capitalist world for, the past maybe 100 or so years. It really hasn't been that long. But
mm,
if you look at the past, thousands of years that humanity has been in civilization, we were living with the earth hand in hand. And people actually derived their calendars and their time and counting systems all from the planets and from the moon. I mean, you look at all these ancient cultures and they still use the lunar calendar. I mean, even in Islam, even though I don't really follow any specific religion, but you can still see Islam as using the moon for their calendar to decide when people will fast and when they'll break fast. And I find that to be absolutely remarkable that that's been sort of held for so many years. And we really had this very close relationship with the planets a long time ago. And, as you mentioned, obviously it's important to have scientific, support for all of these different concepts that we hold dear. But, at the end of the day, science is, today is not what it used to be a long time ago. A long time ago, science and spirituality were one and the same. They were only
that's true.
separated. Yeah, they were only separated to, sort of push a certain agenda forward. It was not because it worked. It was not because it was accurate. It was just to push a specific agenda forward, and that it did. So, it served its purpose. But if we really look back at all the ancient traditions, I mean, even small, really, things that we may not see as very important. If you look at like, ancient civilizations, like even in Greece nowadays, people will still put a basil plant in front of their door to ward off, bad spirits. And it's something that has been so ingrained in our society. And there have been so many humans, brutally murdered for practicing all of these different small traditions that they had. I mean, let's not even go through, the Germanic tradition and how that has been completely erased. I don't want to get too angry about all these things, but there's been a lot of injustices in the past for, through the erasure of these ancient customs that have been built throughout thousands of years. And so if we really look back, there's this one concept that just holds true, the fact that we are so close to the earth, we've been living with the earth, and the illusion that most people don't realize now is that we are not separate from the earth. I mean, where do we get all our food? Where do we get our water? If it wasn't for the earth, we would not even exist. So
Mm,
it's a very easy jump to make when we think about it from the in a grander scheme of things. um, but so the connection to so it's not so hard to believe that we would look up at the sky and be like, oh yeah, when this planet is in this specific spot, these things tend to happen. So in terms of eclipses, these were very potent moments that had op- provided opportunity for a portal to open up, for new timelines to exist, for certain events to sort of become almost like come in at full force, right? Something that's not expected. For example, with full moons, it's almost like an ending, but that an ending that's extremely potent, right? Like a death or something like that. Whereas like an eclipse connected to like a new moon or something like that is maybe like a new beginning that you totally didn't expect, right? Like meeting somebody that is going to be super important in your life, right? And the fact that these eclipses have been connected to they were in Scorpio, I believe, in May of last year, as well as Taurus. And Taurus it represents the earth, right? It is literally Mother Gaia. And whereas Scorpio is almost like this emotional depth, where it's almost like the dark side of the emotions, not necessarily, but it's just like this depth of the ocean, right? Like the depth of the emotion that exists in the human realm. And then with Pisces, the one that came up recently, the super moon, that blue moon just basically means that there's two full moons in 1 month, which is super rare. There's only usually one new moon and one full moon in 1 month, and so that's why it was super potent. But basically, it was also very close to Earth, right? Like it's the closest it's been in a while. So there were a lot of different aspects as to why it was so important. But the reason it was especially meaningful for me was because, Pisces represents spirituality, right? The connection to the spiritual and the magical. And it also represents water. It's a water sign. And so the fact that I was able to get solace, almost like this dreamy like solace through a river was just magical and exceptionally, meaningful in that moment, especially. So, yeah, I feel like I went on a little bit about that. But I also just wanted to quickly mention the epigenetic part of this. Oh my goodness. I think we can do an entire episode about epigenetics, because I actually was super interested in genetics in college, and I did genetics for a little bit, and it was because I wanted to study epigenetics, but it wasn't possible, excuse me, at the time for me. But then, obviously with the unfolding of the awakening, I connected the dots and began realizing that I actually worked with genetic manipulation in Atlantis, and also on Hadar in Beta Centauri and Lyra. Because the Lyrans, the beings connected with Lyra or Vega, are DNA masters, basically, or like have had, a lot of experience working with DNA. So I feel like I hold that lineage and I hold it in very high regard. So I feel like that's a conversation that can really go on for a very long time. But I just wanted to, in case you want to talk about genetics, I'm your person.
I think in the context of, I love what you just said, all of it. I think in the context of what we're talking about, I could probably handle it. If you were going to say, let's talk about genetics, like in biology class, I'd be like, no. but since we're talking about in this context, yeah, definitely. And a lot of the things that you were talking about with previous civilizations, I would love to also continue with that as well, because there's a lot to be learned from that. And
oh yeah,
I think
there's so much.
Sometimes we desperately need elders in this so-called society we live in right now. Unless you're a traditional, unless you've been lucky enough to live traditionally for the last 50 years or 100 years, however long you've been living on the earth, and you've grown your own food, and you've had an elder, and you've had a community of, there's some people on the earth who are like that. They're like less than 5% of the entire global population is like that, but somewhat. That means 95% of us, that's pretty much a majority, are not living like that. So therefore, we need this. We need this
exactly
more than we realize. The more I do this work, the more I realize how desperately we need this in our culture. Whether when I say our culture, I mean the 21st century modern culture that is pretty much engulfs the entire globe at this point. I mean, I don't think you can go anywhere on the earth right now and not be affected by it. So somehow,
yeah
I
It's
mean,
true.
maybe a few places, but not many. So I hate to cut us short, but I think we need to continue this. But
I agree.
because I think we've just barely tapped into, several things we can talk about, and I'm like super excited to talk about it. But before we leave, I wanted to make sure, could you tell everybody where they can find you and about you have a new course, I believe?
Oh yes, so I'm still building a course. It's been I've taken the opportunity of Mercury retrograde to really just reconstruct some parts of my business. But I am doing all different types of readings, whether it's astrology, human design. I even do psychedelic prep and integration, a lot of different things. I'm moving more towards creating workshops and classes at the moment. I'm doing an ascension class. I think that's the one that I had mentioned to you, and I can link everything in the show notes. I can send it all. But basically, you can find me on Instagram at galactic.blueprint or at my website galacticblueprint.io. And again, we'll link everything. But yeah, that's basically what I've been working on recently. Just building courses, trying to, spread the knowledge.
Excellent. And I've taken one of your courses and it blew my mind. So, and maybe we'll talk about
No,
that sometime. Um, I
thank
think
you.
that, yes, they're very, congratulations, because I thought it was amazing.
No,
Um, I think what we'll do is I would love to pick this up again and just get into some of those topics that we were talking about. If you'd
hmm.
love to come back, I would love to have you.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
maybe not too far off in the future, so that we can follow up and we'll see what happens. And in the meantime, if you guys want to find me, I can be reached at www.patreon.com/shamanic earth medicine. That's where you can join our community if you like. And you can also reach me at Linktree, www.linktr.ee/now moment journey. And I'll put those in the notes too. But in the meantime, I hope everyone stays safe and well. And thank you so much, Leila.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'm so grateful, so grateful, and so excited for the next time. And thank you all for listening.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Bye.